So we want to get the ground rolling and begin to, for him to begin to help us out on some of the issues that we have raised at the point of introduction of this discussion today. Doctor, you are highly welcome, sir, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Now, in 2024, CBN set out to implement several policies in the process of ensuring that we have forex stability, forex liquidity, as well as stabilizing the Naira. And there's one statement that the CBN governor made that many economists were like, why did he say so? He said Naira was undervalued. And because of that, he introduced a lot of market-friendly policies. But that statement keep recurring. Anytime people want to talk about why Naira is not stabilized, why Naira is having that, because of that undervalued statement that the CBN governor made. Doc, what do you make of that statement?
Okay, first let's start putting some meat into the word value and then what money is. So money basically is a value of exchange.
Exactly.
So what it means is that the value in money is the exchange it brings. Okay? Yes. So what gives your money value is what you bring onto the table technically. That's what that means. So if the Naira is undervalued, it simply means that what the CBN governor is trying to say is that the Naira as a medium of exchange has not been able to, create a competitive space or get a market share or get a place, at that table in international trading. This is basically what it is. Okay.
Now, are you done so that
yes,
I can
please.
have a follow-up question? Now, the follow-up question is this. One of the initiative of the CBN was that, one of the query before now was that we have multiple exchange platforms that was not giving direction to how forex liquidity can come into the country. And the government said, okay, let us close them down. And in the last 1 year to 14, 16 months, in your own understanding, has that really saved the Naira and also help us to have liquidity in high supply?
Again, we're just taking this one after the other.
Yeah, exactly.
At the point in time, you had these multiple windows. What were they trading? They were trading dollar. So the good in view, the service in view was the dollar. And each, window had its own, demand and supply systems. So in closing it to get the single window was what you call those instruments of now managing it. So in trying to stabilize the Naira, which is, I think, the focus of what you're talking about.
Exactly.
I think what you should be talking about, you don't stabilize what you've strengthened, and you do not stabilize what is weak. Okay, first and foremost, you need to strengthen, give some impetus to it. And then after that, you can now begin to talk about stabilizing. Stabilizing means, okay, now we've gotten you up the ground. You're now fit enough to go back into the ring and box yourself, into getting a recognition, a medal, or a trophy. Now, this is where we are. So you have a currency that is undervalued. You have a currency that is weak. You have a currency you need to stabilize. Okay, but you are missing the word strengthening, because the key to everything you have mentioned to it becoming stronger is to give it strength. If you say it's weak, the key to now you stabilizing it is for you to now have a market share, okay, which you need to do. So the key will be, what is that thing apart from your monetary and your fiscal policies and instruments? What is that thing you need to be able to give impetus to currency, so that you stop trading currency and start trading goods and services? So at one time, when you talk about people now speculating with the dollar, what were they doing? They were buying and selling dollar. Is that not what it was? Okay, so each time, and then it became very difficult to control them, especially with the BDC operators, especially with the banks being unable to meet the high demand of Forex, especially with even some aspect of terror financing, especially even with the introduction of the Bitcoin and what eventually happened to the people who are operating it. So there are so many multiple windows, but the missing element, which was very key, is that you had no products that were competitive, that could not give impetus to a single window. This is what it is.
Now, there is this new discussion and as well as analysis and narrative now that people are now asserting that, okay, one of the things that will help us to strengthen Naira this year, 2024, is the production of our crude oil. If you can be able to produce crude oil, if you're able to refine locally. many people are now putting that out. Do you share in that sentiment?
No, you see, crude oil is slowly getting extinct. You must know that. I mean, so if you're going to be focusing on crude oil, you're riding a very weak horse that sooner than later is not going to be of any use. I mean, remembering that a lot of countries are now taking policies, to totally and completely stop the use of petrol engines. So in the next decade or so, you're going to be seeing fewer and fewer, big players, having any need for crude oil, except, of course, you're talking about producing it for the diesel component, for the greases, for the gases, and additives, maybe for your jet fuels. But it is not only crude oil. When Nigeria was that big player in the international community or committee of states, when Nigeria, where you could spend Naira in the streets of London, it wasn't crude we were selling. It was cocoa, it was timber, it was granules, it was tin, it was columbite. All right? Go and fact check it. At that point in time, we were at one time the biggest producers of columbite in the world, and tin, or I think the third largest producer of tin now. Now, the beautiful thing is that a lot of the mines that were producing these things are yet very virgin. Virgin to the extent that very few of them had gone deeper than 30 meters in depth. A lot of them, hadn't even reached what they call the mineral load before the 1975 indigenous decree that saw the exit of a lot of these international companies. And then you come to agriculture, okay? You have 82 million hectares, okay, of land that is arable, okay, that can be put into a very productive agricultural and the whole value process of agriculture. And I'm talking about just crop now. Now, you are talking about your cattle economy that as laid back, as pedestrian as it is presently valued at over 10 trillion. Okay, because if you just do a little forced sale value of, I think, the 24 million heads of cattle you have in the country, and you put it on a forced sale value of 100,000, which is not possible now. I mean, cows are selling as much as 1.2, 1.3 million. So you will now know what it is valued. Okay, and so many other mineral resources. So in strengthening the Naira, remember, I'm very measured in moving away from the word stabilizing. Because stabilization, comes, you cannot stabilize somebody who is on life support. You can stabilize the person to now begin a healing process. But you don't stabilize somebody who just got out of a life support and give him gloves to get into the ring. Okay, you need to build back his strength. So after this stabilization, it's important to build this strength. And in building the strength, it is all about productivity. Okay.
I'm going to that because we have been on a similar platform where you share your idea about productivity. But in looking at generally at what CBN have done so far in 2024, because as I said out in my report earlier, the gain of the Naira is just 7 Naira. Of all the measures they have taken, about 13 different measures that CBN have taken between 2023 to end of 2024, just 7 Naira, that's what Naira gain. Now, in all these measures, what do you think were the challenge that set back the prospect? Because CBN was hoping that with all the measures they are putting in place, there'll be a better Naira come 2025 or before the end of 2025. But what they could be able to celebrate was just 7 Naira at the end of the year.
Well, I think that celebration is worth it because, it's like somebody who's been stripped naked. And then some other person, gives the person a pair of used worn clothes. It's worth celebrating because what it is you have done is that he's on the back of recovery. You've at least covered his shame and covered his nakedness. Now, to that extent, you can say that the CBN doing what it is they need to do using instruments. And these instruments, controls, bans, limitations, enforcement. These are all instruments. Now, it is first and foremost to get the guy to start breathing again. Like I just tried to tell you, the man who's in coma, and you're giving oxygen and all that to get him to at least start breathing. He's not on his feet yet. Now, for him to be on his feet, he'd be needing a combination of medication, of nutrition, of whatever it is you need to do. And this is where productivity comes in. Like I told you in my intro, what you bring to the table. Money is an exchange of value. So the word exchange, the moment you interpret it, what you're going to be seeing there will be goods and services. That's what exchange means. Okay. Now, if you're exchanging goods and these goods are produced, okay, within your system, and then this is where it gets complex. Okay, you can be producing a good, and then the gross value of that good is not coming from you because you are not in control of your back end. So it's not. There's what they call valorization in economics, and valorization is that get it C ready, C worthy, and then when it now gets to where it's going to, so you have raw materials, being valorized to make them at least be able to reach to a destination. Now, the moment you lose the control of that raw material source, okay, probably we're talking about, for instance, paper. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, who has a forest, and he has a lot of this, melana trees in there. And I said, okay, what you need to be doing is not to be cutting this wood for tree. You're supposed to be producing pulp. Okay? And if you can turn this thing into pulp, why would you want to sell your pulp? Why won't you now want to, start, maybe get a paper making industry here? And when you are talking about paper, go to do some printing and see. So this is where technology now comes into productivity. So it's not all about, we have gone to do, for instance, we're producing pure water. And I said, okay, you're producing pure water. Where are the machines that are selling your pure water? Who is producing them for you? Now, this is where your gross values begin to go to. Where are your sealants coming from? Where are your reagents coming from? Where are your even the polyethylene or polystyrene that they use in packaging it coming from? So for you to get the full value of that exchange, you must also, look at the back end. Okay, those support systems that can be able to now give you full value, to become productive. So production and productivity are not the same thing, if you understand what I've just tried to explain to you now.
Yes, sir. Now, in that regard, there's also another issue. Federal government on their part has also put several measures in place to make Nigeria to be productive. But CBN has always complained about this disconnection between monetary policy and fiscal policy. Then it was also added that even the trade policy of Nigeria is also constituting some challenges to the Forex problem that we have and the stability of Naira. But in your own view, how can we ensure that we marry these three sectors together and be able to get to that productivity level that you have proposed?
Okay, like I said, first and foremost, define what production is. All right? And then be able to give a value to production. And in production, you're talking about the production of goods and services. Now, but if you're talking about productivity, it gets a little bit bigger because in this case now, you're talking about the human capital angle, you're talking about the transition angle, infrastructure, you're talking about the energy angle, okay, you're talking about the raw materials angle. Now, these are where, again, these trade policies that you talked about, your monetary policies and your fiscal policies, now we need to have a meeting point. Because the fiscal policies are basically government policies, okay, programs and actions. Now, the monetary policies is basically those instruments that the central bank uses in now, stabilizing or hedging, or trying to now make certain that your monetary systems control inflation and inflationary measures and all that long story. And then, of course, your trade policies, who you buy, who you sell, what you buy from, and then. Now, this is where what I told you earlier comes to play. Okay, it's called the politics of international economic relations. Okay, a lot of the things we are doing now, if you look at the AFTA program, for instance, if you looked at all the industries that Nigeria could play in the AFTA through, look at their background. Most of them are not indigenous. Most of them are investors who come in here. Just mention one, you'll be very shocked. Including your oil and gas sector. The only indigenous oil sector that is wholly owned, in fact, right now, I don't even think it's now wholly owned, is the MPDC. Okay, and even at that now, they're having investors farming into it. Okay, so it's something that you need to think through. The CBN, in trying to put out the fire, must be commended. They have done what best they can do. But you see, there is, to an extent, you can use instruments, to be able to control the situation. Because remember that we are also intrinsically tied to this global supply chain, variables or shocks, depending. So, and then your currency, you must discount, in that global trading currency. Right now, Naira is not listed in any, global platform. I don't know of any, where you can, use Naira to buy. So you now need to discount and then begin to now, trade in that global currency. So if we are going to be getting these things, the ECOWAS currency, that convergence point would have helped, but it also has a lot of its own, difficulties. So if we start, it will be another 2 days of talking. But what is key is that first and foremost, there is the determination for us to be able to move further from where we are. But that determination is not going to be talk. It has to be work.
Now, talking about talk and work, one of the things that CBN also did last year to ensure that in their projection of stabilizing Naira, they brought up a new technology called the Bloomberg Match. I know you must have heard about the Bloomberg Match, whereby all traders, all platforms must come to that. And I discovered that when I studied that particular platform and I discovered the result, I think that was when this game of 4 Naira started, 5 Naira started, and by this week it is now 7 Naira.
What were they trading in that Bloomberg platform?
It's still currency.
That's what we've been talking about now, my brother. Other people are trading metals. Other people are trading ingots. And you're trading currency. If you're not even trading currency, you're just discounting. That's what you're doing.
Exactly.
So if you understand this clearly, like I've said to you, if we decided it was only the steel sector, China became what it is, it became today because it took a deliberate policy on steel production and consumption. India became the biggest producers of steel in under 10 years, had made over 10 billionaires dollar based on steel. They took a deliberate policy on their iron ore, taking it to ingots or metals and then taking it to steel. Okay, so if us as a country, we need to move out of this control of trading, which is what is available now. We need to change the thinking. We need to change the dynamics. Okay, we need to do what we call a total and complete paradigm shift. Okay, and it's going to just not involve building of factories, which mostly are not industries, but production points. Okay, because when you're talking about industrialization in its real sense, now the best of industries, we first and foremost, elementary economics, the first thing they say, nearness to market, nearness to raw materials, and all that and all that. But raw materials is key. Very, very key. Now, your energy infrastructure is critical. Okay? Now, your transport infrastructure is key. Your human capital is key. Your technology and who produces it or who gives it to you. And this is why you talk about reverse engineering. So this matter is not as simple as, what do we do to strengthen the Naira? Somebody, let's produce more. It's not an open system.
Now that you have made mention of industrialization, one of the things that the President Tinubu is intending to do in 2025 is how to industrialize Nigeria. But industrialization will not just be on the policy table alone, talking about just like what Doctor have mentioned, talking about job production alone. It goes beyond that because we have structural industrialization challenges in Nigeria. But going forward into that industrialization is key to helping us to strengthen Naira. That's what Doctor have been pointing on this particular issue. But in your own understanding, Doctor, because government, before you know it now, the government will launch industrialization roadmap 2025. And some of the things that you have been mentioning right now may not be there. So how can government go ahead with this kind of thing, industrialization, to help not just our productivity, but to also help the value of our currency, which we are talking about today?
Well, you see, sometimes what we are doing here is also what we call citizens' participation. Okay, maybe 1 or 2% are listening, maybe 1 or 2 points can be taken. But in talking about government and infrastructure, I keep saying to people that the subnationals are more important, okay, because they are the foundations that you must build on, all right? The national would bring in that powers of, superintending, the process, okay, and then trying to now build that national whole for everybody to participate by probably producing this allied and necessary infrastructure required for you to first and foremost, kick in your local investments. And I can tell you, for whatever it is we are looking for, you can get 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 people who might give it to you locally here. Okay, if the framework is right. So I think the most important thing, first and foremost, is to build a national framework and not a federal framework. It's important. And in building that national framework, you won't be talking only about the Tinubu administration, which is at the federal level. And he keeps saying that, you know, he has a synergy with the governors, irrespective of which political leaning that they have. At least he said that, I think, on Saturday in Enugu. Okay. Now, what that means is that it's time now for us. You're looking for solutions. You must be able to now build some program, just like you went to the Bloomberg thing, where you can also now have a common front where every budget of every state is aligned to the demands and expectations and outputs of the federal budget, especially those key areas that are in the concurrent list, like agriculture. Okay, that's very key. Like education. Now, even energy, some aspect of energy has also been put into the concurrent list. So now, the moment you do that, now let me tell you what's happening. You will now have a Nigerian food production system, not a federal government food production program. So that everybody who's producing probably yam, and that is now, you know, somehow aligned. And then you have now what you call a national output that can now define your gross domestic product. But in this happening, this is where your research, you know, comes. The research institutes are key to this in doing your seeds, in doing your lands, in doing your fertilizers, in doing your pesticides and insecticides. You understand? So it's just not going to be a walk in the park. And it's not something that you can announce and then everybody buys into it. Because remember that a lot of the things that happen in the states are like the things that happen in the federal government. They have now become an act of law. Okay, a lot of these budgets that are being approved at the state levels become laws. So you can't just wake up and then circumvent it because the federal government has done something similar. Like. But if you had this clearinghouse where maybe before at NEC or something, you now have technical sessions where states will now fit into that federal whole. Okay, so agriculture in Adamawa ties to agriculture in Abia, ties to agriculture in Benue, ties to agriculture in Ogun, ties to agriculture. Somehow they might not be, you know, producing one particular product, but the process, the thinking, okay, the expected outputs, the inputs, okay, will just be building towards that national whole that you can now calculate against your national needs.
Now, very interesting from you and insightful also from you. You know, when we talk about strengthening Naira or ensuring that we have liquidity of Forex, one of the key questions someone will ask me is that, and we're talking about liquidity of Forex, we already have our 5 channels that Forex normally come into Nigeria. We sell crude oil. We have our brothers and sisters who send in money into the country, about the money they send to us here. Then we also have investors coming through FPL or FGI. Then we also have, you know, loans that government collect, and as well as you know, receipt from government activities on international level. But all this being put together, we still have challenge of liquidity. When Cardoso came on board in 2023, there are about 43 items that people have said that locally we can comfortably produce these 43 items. But what did he do? He asked them to also have opportunity to access official dollar from the central bank. Meanwhile, he predecessor banned those 43 items not to access dollar. Doc, those 43 items that came back to access Forex, what's your view about that? Because a lot of people have questioned the rationale behind asking them to go back and accessing dollar from Central Bank of Nigeria. Meanwhile, we can produce some of those things. Furniture is there. Groundnut oil is there.
If you've ever experienced somebody with itching, okay, there's no style for the itch. Some might use their teeth, some might start pouring powder, some will use sand. But what is important is at that point in time, you want that itch to start, to stop. And this is what they call the fire brigade approach. Okay, a lot of the utterances, statements from the CBN had clearly shown that what they saw okay, was beyond what they expected. So they needed to start pulling it anyhow to get people. And at one time, there was call for his head, but do this, do that, do this. Now, in that state of confusion, everybody becomes a professional. Nobody wants to listen to another person. It's like when you're a football enthusiastic. I mean, you don't want to stay in a place where people are trying to explain why the man missed the goal.
It's true.
And you give him that ball, he kicks it backwards. So it's not a very easy thing to try to rebuild. It's a very difficult and tortuous process. But in also saying that, it is also not easy. It's easier said than done. We can produce it comfortably. Now, you have a lot of your land where you can do what you are doing now, which is not even advisable, rain-fed agriculture, in the hands and control of non-state actors. Okay? And it's not as if you go in there and then you can just line up as all of you, surrender, come forward and then we'll arrest all of you. No. If it was easy, it wouldn't have lasted this long. Okay? More so that this has also taken an international dimension. Okay? You have loose borders, especially in our, field belt. Now, that's one. Two, you also now have the paucity of funds, because in also doing whatever it is you want to do, be it mining, be it agriculture, be it food production, be it food processing, whatever it is you want to do, whatever you've listed, including toothpicks that were in that list.
Also.
Now, you will need some level of inputs vis-a-vis funding, capital, infrastructure, okay, and even distribution networks. So it is not easy. That's the point I'm trying to make. But also having said that, and that's what I'm saying to you, that doing it only as federal government makes it even more difficult. Because if we want to tell ourselves the truth, even before the new revenue sharing formula, the states and the local governments have always had a larger chunk, okay, of what is shared in the federation. But you find it's very difficult for anybody to want to say, okay, fine, how come we are not building this relationship, okay, that ties everybody to this whole? Okay, if the state governors are the ones that actually have total and complete control, if you may, of the land, the federal government has little or no land, apart from maybe the ones they use for special projects and all that. All the lands are in the hands of the states. Ditto now, drill it down to the local government. So the point I'm trying to make to you is that, yes, those 33 or 43 items, had to come back because we started facing a lot of challenges vis-a-vis food insecurity. That's the truth. Our local production capacities, we're doing good because a lot of people went on forced migration. All right, you saw a lot of young men loitering all over the streets doing nothing. They had just fled from where they were, ready to sleep in the streets and stay alive. So the security architecture and capacity to also run the non-state actors out of business is very critical. I am from the Southeast. If I tell you what we lose, okay, and because the Southeast is also part of the national whole, what the country loses, from the Southeast, you'll be very shocked. Just on one day of sitting at home. And then you try to attempt to come out, because this is not conventional, war. Somebody just jumps out of a bush and then, and fires at you and then burns your car and say we're enforcing the sit at home. Okay? So security is very central, but curbing security is also not chopping chocolate, unfortunately.
Exactly. So before we go on this show, I know we don't have much time again, but Doc, going forward,
yes,
I told you 13 different policy was introduced between 2023 and then 2024. As rightly pointed out, it is worth celebrating. At least Naira gained 7 Naira from all other from the dollar, which is the major currency that I normally trade with. Now going to 2024, the government is hoping that they will stabilize the Naira. They will also boost the value of the Naira. What would be your advice to the government, the CBN, and the federal government? And not to forget the subnational, which you have mentioned in your narrative?
There's one word they call volume for value. Okay, now what does volume for value mean? Way back in those days, when the British were a colony of Britain, what you saw were ships. Okay, trading was done in shiploads. You had shiploads of granules, shiploads of cocoa, shiploads of this, not even trailers. Now, what you had then were plantations. We didn't have farms. Nobody is talking about plantation in Nigeria.
Or 2 hectares or 3 hectares.
Everybody is talking about 10 hectares. In those days, what you had were plantations of whatever it was that needed to fill up that ship. And then it went from even plantations to belts. All right, in the developed world where they were now using, aircraft to water and then spray chemicals. So, if you want to strengthen, stabilize, you must do volume for value. And then that volume is the bulk. The value is the competitiveness. Is a value process to give to it. So you just don't go and gather all your cocoa and then go and put it inside a ship and then spray some chemicals to just make it seaworthy. And then after 2 weeks, somebody comes and says, oh, I'm starting a company, Bonvita or whatever, produced a Lecon Vita.
Lecon Vita to be exported.
Lecon Vita, no, produced in, proudly produced in Nigeria. But Lecon Vita now says flavors and ingredients imported
from China.
Okay, so now the moment you do that, that gross is no longer yours. Okay, so you are no longer building that value. So if we are going to be getting back to where we're supposed to be, and it's very easy for us to do that, it is for us to have a clear thinking of population against land, land against natural resources, okay, natural resources against outputs that are clearly marked, okay, so that everybody has a role, okay, just like in those days when we were growing up, and it was in such a way that you either belong to the Boy Scout or you belong to the Girls Guide or the Boys Brigade or some regimented format that matched you towards you being you and you knowing that you had some contribution to make to the country. If we start by looking at our human capital, it does not have to be formal education.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be.
We have to leave it like this, but I hope that we'll soon bring you back because we need to do another expository on this issue of stabilizing Naira, also boosting the value of Naira. It's very important. And Doc have said it all. The key to it is not the matching here. It is not the trading of the currency per se. But although we appreciate the CBN for what they have done in the last 16, 18 months, but more need to be done. And that is marrying our monetary fiscal policy as well as trade policy together on the basis of productivity. If we are not productive, there's no way we can strengthen the Naira. We want to appreciate Dr. Emeka Okengwu, development economist, for being on the show today, the market economy. We appreciate you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And I know a lot of our viewers have learned and be able to appreciate what it means to stabilize Naira.